It's been said that British Columbia is the world in a single province. Well, the farther I travel with our BC Moments crew, the more I believe it's true. Hello, I'm Malcolm Stewart. As part of the North American Cordillera, BC lies within one of the world's most mountainous regions. From the Pacific Ocean to the Rockies, BC is a succession of mountain ranges separated by broad valleys, rolling highlands, and plateaus. Near sea level, we have coastal fjords, islands, and rainforests. And above the tree line are alpine meadows and glaciers. And in between are open grasslands, a desert, complete with tumbleweeds and rattlesnakes, and a patch of Canadian prairie. This episode of BC Moments from Knowledge Network is a sampling of the varied landscapes that make BC the world in a single province. We'll loaf in hot springs in the foothills of our coastal mountains, hike the Rockies, and take a trip to the prairies. But first, let's go surfing. Some surfers like to rewarm their bodies in the steamy pools just up coast from Tofino at Hot Springs Cove. Most of Canada's hot springs are in BC, mainly near the coast and in the Kootenays. Our coastal hot springs appear in the same areas as volcanoes. Mount Garibaldi or Black Tusk are well-known volcanoes in the coast mountains. In the Cascades to the south are Mount Baker and the notorious Mount St. Helens. And sandwiched between these volcanic ranges are BC's most famous hot springs.
With an emerald lake shimmering below the coast mountains on one side and Mount Shiam in the Cascades on the other, Harrison Hot Springs would be an inviting place for a holiday even without the hot springs. Only 100 kilometers east of Greater Vancouver, Harrison Hot Springs was one of British Columbia's earliest resort communities. The story goes that in the winter of 1858, a man who fell out of a canoe into Harrison Lake was unexpectedly immersed in soupy, warm water. Hot springs were discovered at the south end of the lake, and a resort soon sprang up around them. Before float planes and motor cars, vacationers arrived aboard the paddle wheeler Vedder, which crossed the Fraser from Chilliwack and ran up the Harrison River to the hot springs. They stayed at the St. Alice Hotel, built in 1886. But the St. Alice's life was tragically cut short in 1920. A new hotel went up on the same site in 1926. That year, a road came to Harrison Hot Springs, and hotel guests were shuttled in jitneys up from the Agassiz Railway Station. Harrison Hot Springs was a convalescence home in the final days of World War II. In the 1950s, the hotel was taken over by Seagram's, the whiskey distillers. As in the early days, people come to ease their aches and stresses in the curative mineral waters piped in from the natural hot springs. 3 outdoor pools at Harrison Hot Springs Resort cater to different guests. Besides a cooler lap swimming pool, there's one hot pool for adults only. Another pool is mainly for kids and parents. For those who prefer their water sports in a natural setting, the lake and sandy beaches are right outside the resort's front door. Long and narrow, Harrison Lake fills the lower end of the Lillooet River Valley. On summer afternoons, brisk winds funnel down between the mountains. Not all of the outdoor action at Harrison Hot Springs is water-oriented. Every July, spectators come to hear the music and shop the wares of artisans who set up under canopies along the lakeshore for the Harrison Festival of the Arts.
You got me crawling down on my hands and knees.
While live music flows from a nearby stage, people mosey from one artist to another, watching their creations take shape.
Take it over, tell me, baby, can I bring my clothes back home? I was crazy, honey, when I did you wrong. I need your love all day and all night long. Take it over, tell me, baby, can I bring my clothes back home? I ain't lying, I swear it's true. I wanna come back home to you. I wanna hold you in my arms all through the night and be beside you, baby, in the morning light. The way I was, honey, I ain't no more. it's a better man knocking at your door. Think it over, tell me, baby, can I bring my clothes back home?
As the cool winds of autumn come to Harrison Hot Springs, it's time again for the annual World Championships of Sand Sculpture. Since 1990, only master sculptors have been invited, and the best in the world come from China, Europe, Australia, and other parts of Canada. More than 60 artists may create 3 or 4 dozen sculptures, competing for more than $40,000 in prize money. Downstream from Harrison Lake, white sturgeon the size of sea lions lurk in the Harrison and Fraser rivers. Sturgeon fishing here has steadily improved since catch and release rules were implemented in 1994. Fish are scanned for magnetic tags that help track their migrations and growth. If no tag is found, one is hypodermically inserted. Well over 20,000 fish have been tagged, which could be 1/3 of the Lower Fraser's white sturgeon population. The length and girth of each fish is measured. This lunker is 2.5 meters long and weighs about 135 kilograms, a whopping 300 pounds. You can skip over the waves or loaf in a hot pool, play a round of golf, or mingle with the artists. Steamy mineral pools are just part of what makes Harrison Hot Springs an inviting place for a holiday, and perhaps a little romance.
After BC's first resort sprang up around the hot springs at Harrison Lake, the discovery of hot springs in the Rocky Mountains led to the creation of Canada's first national park at Banff, Alberta. With the park came the Canadian Pacific Railway and trainloads of wealthy tourists. And just down the tracks on the BC side of the Rockies, Yoho National Park was established 1 year later. Like Banff, Yoho was an instant hit with mountain-loving tourists.
Waterfalls and sheer rock walls. Glacial lakes and rushing rivers. The Cree people call it Yoho, a place of wonder and awe. Yoho is the smallest and one of the most lightly traveled of 4 national parks that are joined together along the British Columbia-Alberta border in the Rocky Mountains. The first visitors to Canada's national parks came on trains, which began running through the Rockies just before Yoho Park was established in 1886. In this mountainous terrain, railway workers were plagued by avalanches. The most hair-raising hazard was a 4.5% grade, one of the steepest in North America, between Kicking Horse Pass and the town of Field. This route was replaced by the famous spiral tunnels, which take trains on circular routes inside Mount Ogden and Cathedral Crags. The Canadian Pacific Railway capitalized on Yoho's mountain scenery and built lodgings for its passengers. A CPR brochure from the 1920s describes the bungalows at Lake O'Hara as so modest and so happily conceived that they seem to melt into their background. Well, not much has changed. In 1902, the CPR built another lodge on Emerald Lake, where today's visitors enjoy the same kind of rustic simplicity as those early train passengers. The lake's icy turquoise color is the result of sunlight reflecting off glacial sediments in the water. These mountains are classic layer-cake geology. 500 million years ago, the rocks here were sediments on an ocean floor. The sediments were solidified into stone and were thrust up into mountains by tectonic movement. Glaciers then chiseled the landscape into impressive summits and ghostly spires like Cathedral Crags. Locked away in these oceanic sediments are fossilized marine organisms, trilobites, Wiwaxia, and other ancient specimens. This is the Burgess Shale, the world's finest collection of Cambrian-aged fossils. As intriguing as the fossils are Yoho's contemporary species. The coniferous forests are inhabited by noisy nutcrackers, while Columbian ground squirrels like open meadows, where they dig extensive underground warrens. Yoho is also home to elk as big as ponies. Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep like to graze on grassy hills alongside the Trans-Canada Highway. Herds of a dozen or so are commonly photographed from the roadside. Another roadside attraction is the Kicking Horse River. It dissects Yoho Park on its run down to the Rocky Mountain Trench, providing a corridor for both the CPR and the Trans-Canada Highway. The erosive powers of the Kicking Horse are starkly visible at an unusual formation called the Natural Bridge. Here, the ceaseless gush of glacial water has bored a hole right through the limestone riverbed. Upstream from the natural bridge, Field, population 237, is the only BC town within a national park. Yoho's headquarters are here, along with a few buildings dating from the turn of the 20th century. When the Cree people named this land Yoho, they must have been looking at Takaka Falls. This is their word for spectacular, a fitting name for Yoho's most notable landmark. An abrupt drop of 254 meters, Takaka is the second highest waterfall in Canada. Visitors to the falls are deafened by the sound and dampened by the spray of up to 4,000 liters a second thundering down toward the Yoho River. Yoho is viewed by the modern world in the same light as the Cree people have seen it for centuries. These Rocky Mountain landscapes, waterfalls and sheer rock walls, ancient fossil beds, rock spires and glaciated streams are truly unique in the world. Yoho, as the Cree aptly proclaim, is a place of wonder and awe.
Did you know British Columbia is a prairie province? Peace River country up in our far northeast corner lies east of the Rocky Mountains. It's part of Canada's interior plains, the prairies as we know them, stretching all the way to the far side of Lake Winnipeg. This is BC's breadbasket, producing more than 80% of the province's grain. It is also the main producer of canola, our most colorful crop. It grows in BC almost exclusively on our little patch of Canadian prairie. Thanks to our partners in knowledge, our BC Moments team has been able to travel to the far corners of the province, determining for ourselves if we can fairly call British Columbia the world in a single province. I'm almost convinced. On one journey up Princess Louisa Inlet, I daydreamed of Scandinavian fjords. I've noticed the glaciers in Tatsenchini look like Greenland, and those hoodoos along the Chilcotin River could be Utah. Whistler resembles Chamonix in the French Alps, and the peak of Mount Assiniboine is a spitting image of Switzerland's Matterhorn. Perhaps BC's most distinctive quality is that all these worldly characteristics are conveniently available within our own provincial boundaries. In 25 years, our BC Moments have covered over 200 places and events, but when I look ahead to where we haven't been, I'd say we've still got the rest of the world to cover. I'm Malcolm Stewart, inviting you to come along.